Hello. I thought I'd come on and just go over some of the astrology that's happening in the collective. We are on the cusp of the astrological new year, which begins at the spring equinox at the Aries ingress, meaning the sun, which we can see right here, has moved from Pisces finally into Aries. And why is that significant this year? Well, at the same time, on the same date, not the same exact time, but same date, we're also having a new moon at 0 degrees Aries. And so this is kind of a big deal. It's like kind of a double signature of newness to have the astrological new year happen at the same time as the new moon. And so I think that this moon cycle, this next 28 days, is going to be profound for the energy of like what we're seeding in the world. Aries holds the energy of the divine spark. It's a fire sign, and it's the kind of fire that is like lighting a match, the kind of spark of light, right? There's a spark of inspiration or something, some new insight comes down like in a rush into our bodies, and we're inspired to move forward on a new project. I like to think of Aries as the Fool card in the tarot, although there's always some debate about what cards mean what thing. The Fool card in the tarot represents a new journey, like stepping out into the unknown, taking the first step on a new quest for ourselves. And there's this energy of spring coming in, where new flowers are being born. We're finally seeing the winter fall away and signs of new life. It's got a fresh quality to it. And it's also in and around the time that we generally have Easter. And so Easter happens at the first full moon after the equinox happens. And so it's giving us that like the full moon is kind of like that amped up energy of the moon. So again, a double signature of newness. And that's why we have Easter on that day, that quality of rising from the ground. A resurrection is happening in Aries, like after being fallow all winter, after that hibernation period, that sleepy slowness of winter, we now have the sun finally moving into the sign of spring and this kind of quality of awakening. Also, however, we've had a lot of really big astrology in the month of March, and I wanted to speak to what those energies were as well. On the 7th, we had Saturn changing signs after his 3.5 year trek in the sign of Aquarius, which is one of his deciles or home signs. So it's a sign where Saturn is quite strong. So Saturn moved from that sign, Aquarius, into the sign of Pisces, which is a kind of interesting, we could call it a paradoxical transit because Pisces behaves so differently than Saturn does, where Pisces is like the liminal dream world, like the waters of the ocean where there is no horizon, no differentiation, no place to anchor ourselves. It's like just being in huge amount of cosmic soup without being able to grab onto anything. Kind of like an upside down world or Alice in Wonderland, right? Anything is possible. You can mind bend anything. It's a home of dreams, artistry, that kind of universal love, non-dual awareness. And then you have Saturn, who is so related to how we ground ourselves in the world, our discipline, our mastery. He's like called the architect of the zodiac because his capacity to build is profound. He's kind of the cosmic daddy who smacks us over the head when we've gotten out of alignment with our true path. He wants to keep us on the narrow path of ascension to continue to build higher and higher so that we can finally get to the mountain peak of our own lives. And so he has everything to do with structure, with grounding things into the 3D world, with seeding our legacy. He's related to the ancestors. So like this quality of continuation of life And he's a very strong influence on us in the 3D world. He's also somebody who hits us with reality. Now, Pisces being ruled as the modern ruler by Neptune, Neptune has a lot to do with illusion and that Hindu or Sanskrit idea of Maya, like the world is an illusion, right? And so is everything in it. And so we're just swimming through this grand illusion or this grand puzzle. And that's very Piscean in nature as well, this grand puzzle. So there's this like quality of having Saturn, the planet of truth and reality, the planet who wants to see us do well, who is related to discipline and building something concrete in the 3D reality, moving into this more liminal kind of soupy, swampy place where there's a lot of like wetness, right? And so those two qualities of wetness and like hard earth, the mountain, like they don't gel very well. There's a way that in Pisces and Neptune being related to the 12th house and things like, you know, mental illnesses, asylums, hospitals, you know, the kind of like edgy, unknown, not super edgy, but like the captive parts of society, right? The set apart parts of society that have to do with, you know, just like how well we're mentally doing in the world, if we bought into delusions, or that, you know, kind of 1960s idea of the asylum, the hysterical woman, where the science wasn't really grounded either. It was just like shots in the dark in terms of how you treat mental illness. You've got Saturn, a sign of real clarity and real decisive action. You know, the sign that wants to refine. So like go back and do it over and over and over again until it's perfect, you know, waking us up to uncomfortable truths. And so I think over the next few years, those rose-colored glasses that Pisces allows us to wear, the places he allows us to sort of check out of life, buy into fantasies, use our imagination to kind of save us from the harshness of reality. I don't know that we'll be able to do that in the same way with Saturn in Pisces the next 3 years. With the one really, I think, kind of beneficial part of this sign is that like so often, you know, if somebody is into astrology, they're often into other magical and spiritual endeavors. And some of those endeavors are really great because they're grounded in reality and they help bring people more concretely into their lives. They help them flourish and thrive in their lives in a grounded and positive way. But some of those spiritual endeavors are more Vata-like. I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner. And so it's like they help people dissociate from their lives or escape from their lives. You know, like there's like a spiritual kind of dissociation that can happen with some of the realms of spirituality that people play in. And so I think what we're going to see over the next 3 years is a real reckoning in the spiritual world about what is healthy and grounding, what does actually help people thrive and flourish in a grounded way versus, you know, what spiritual paths are people walking down that are really taking them out into the realm of dissociation where they are no longer connected to life. You know, like our spiritual path should always help us anchor into our families more and into our everyday life more. It shouldn't be taking us out of our life. And so there's almost this quality of like healing from healing, or even this idea that like, you know, one of the things that has become really popular has been, you know, all of these like vulnerability shares, right? And so we can get compassion fatigue from all of the kind of like empathy that's generated. Pisces is the home of the martyr. And so it's like, you know, people come online and talk about their traumas. The news highlights like, you know, victims as heroes and talking about like, how do we really exalt the victim archetype in our culture? And do we do it in a way that's healthy? Now, one caveat here is that the victim archetype is part of our humanity. It's not something we necessarily need to scold and get rid of. But we also don't want to exalt it and get stuck in the stories of the victim so as that we don't move forward in our lives. And so, I think Saturn is so much like one great word for him is right relationship. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but like being in right relationship kind of means like a balanced, grounded relationship. And so coming into right relationship with spirituality, with how we're using spirituality and psychology in our lives, are we using it to excuse, manipulate, dissociate, or are we using it to bring us into more presence for more flourishing and more thriving in our lives? So that's kind of Saturn and Pisces. The other thing, this kind of move from Aquarius being a sign of real like idealism, real like humanitarianism. But it's very exalted. It's not necessarily idealism is just that. It's not the reality. So there's a divorce there, right? So we're moving from this place where there's been a lot of cultural conversations around how things quote unquote should be, and a lot of arguing and social movements and things of that nature about how we should be running the world. And so now Pisces or Saturn is moving from that sign into Pisces, where Aquarius as an air sign has to do with the intellect. So yes, there was a lot of talking about the way things should be, a lot of arguing online and debating on news stations and stuff. But, in Pisces, it's like an area of works where we're no longer going to just be satisfied with paying lip service to our ideals. It's where kind of like we can actually ground the dream into reality, like bring the divine into matter and get to work, like put our hands. Virgo is the opposite side of Pisces. Virgo and Mercury are associated with the hands. So it's like, how can we put all of these great ideas that we have for the future, all of the wants and hopes and dreams for the future, how can we put them into reality? How can we get to work on them? And I think that we'll find this kind of like with Pisces being the last sign, it's about completion, right? So the last sign of the zodiac is always about completion. We're going to be completing a 30-year transit with Saturn here. And so like, how do we really now finish the work we started, make sure that it's grounded and ready to go? And Saturn helps us with that, like that building of the legacy. And what stuff needs to go? Like, what stuff did we dream up that just isn't possible, isn't working, isn't healthy, isn't balanced? So that's Saturn and Pisces. And then on the 23rd, we have Pluto moving into, finally, he's here at the 29th sign or 29th degree. Pluto finally moving from Capricorn into Aquarius. And Aquarius can be kind of a tough sign to explain. So I like to kind of use Capricorn to juxtapose against Aquarius, so we have a better feel or understanding for what Aquarius is. Capricorn is the sign of closed systems. So like government, hierarchy, corporations, even a country club is kind of like a closed system. Everybody has membership. It's like the place of the collective and where the collectivist doctrine resides. It's the place where it's not necessarily, potentially not called the place of the collective, but it's kind of the place where if the collective gets out of line, Saturn goes and ushers the people back in. Nope, you're going to stay in line. You're going to, behave the way that we have all ascribed to as part of this closed system. So then Aquarius is everyone who's been kicked out of the closed system, the exile, the heretic, the rebel, the the innovator, right? The people whose ideas were just too crazy for inside the closed system. Think of Nikola Tesla, who was never accepted because, his ideas were too quote unquote radical for the, the theories didn't make money, right? For the people inside the closed system. And so Pisces is like this group of people who have been thrown out, who have real and true ideas about what the future should look like, about how to move humanity forward. Aquarius is across from the sign of Leo, Leo being the radiant heart of the king, right? The Leo, the lion-hearted king. So the king is one person, where Aquarius's ideals tend to favor the many, like the commoner. And so like the Aquarian ideas are like, we're going to better the future for everyone. And while this is a lofty goal, sometimes Aquarian ideals really miss the mark in a massive way. Um, they can become just as distorted as any movement can become. And I think, we've seen over the last several decades, as we've moved into what many astrologers call the age of Aquarius, that technology innovation has been on the rise. Like there's been this huge, massive swell of new innovation, to the point where some of the stuff that they're innovating right now is pretty scary. I said in a class yesterday, like if you threw your fishing rod out far enough into news stories, like in the tech sector, you can find some pretty unsettling stories, because it's the sign of the star of hope or the light at the end of the tunnel. It's sort of divorced from reality in that way. Like it's the sign of the great hope. So like what we hope for, what we aspire to, the loftiness of our dreams, but it's not necessarily yet come to fruition. And so it is that like innovation. The real shadow side, there's a few shadow sides of Aquarius that I think are worth looking at, especially because it's the planet Pluto who rules the shadow, who rules deconstruction, who rules the process of detoxification and kind of revealing and unearthing the territory he moves through. The shadow sides of Pisces are this technology that seems to want to augment humanity, like that idea of transhumanism, using AI. I think we're going to move into territory where we don't really know what we're looking at. We're not sure if it's real. Like think about those deep fakes and the kind of technology we have now to create CGI and the way movies are made now. It's like you don't even have to be on a set. You can just be in a green room. There's going to be this quality of not knowing exactly if what we're looking at is real or true. And so like, how do we develop our muscles like around this, this ability to tell? And I'll speak to that in a few minutes. And then there's also the idea of social movements, like in the last decade, for sure, as Pluto's gotten closer and he's kind of like wrapping up his work with exposing government corruption and exposing the problems inside of closed systems, patriarchy, all of that stuff. It's like it's all been revealed as Pluto's moved through Capricorn. And as he's getting closer to Aquarius, we see this like upswell of these social movements, which is an Aquarian thing. It's like, this is the ideal. Like in an ideal world, all we need is love. All we need is, yeah, everyone is equal. Let people identify as they want to identify. And it's going to be up for inspection. Is this moral? Is this right? Is this good? Does it lead to balance, thriving? Where does this take us in the future? Like how far down this road can we go before we have a problem? And it's going, Pluto being in Aquarius is going to give us the opportunity to discuss the morals and the ethics and really look at, whether this is something we want to integrate into our future and move forward as a culture together with it. Or is there something about this that is distorted? And Pluto will reveal the truth of that. Like there's a huge distortion, in some of the social movements. Like they started off in a way that I could really be on board with. But at this point, some of them have gone too far to the extreme. I worry about the next generation if they continue down this path. Like, what kind of lessons are we going to get? And so with Pisces, so the sign next to Aquarius, there is this like kind of tendency to be a hippie and take on that thought of like, it's all relative, man. So you're served this progressive ideal ism in Aquarius. And then, you know, the way you're taking it in Pisces, a shadow of that is over spiritualization. So like, it's all good. Even the bad stuff is good. It's all fine. Like kind of the way a hippie is, you know, love and peace, man. But what's nice is that as we're beginning this Pluto into Aquarius transit, we've also got Saturn then moving into Pisces, bringing more of the like kind of conservation, the values of traditionalism into that Piscean dimension. So we don't just say, it's all good, man. We're going to just keep going where we're going. But instead, no, stop and take a look. Saturn is exalted in Libra, which is Venus's sign, and that's a place of where we really look at values. And so Saturn has something to do with how we hold the highest values, and like, does this fit in like with natural law, and asking those questions like, you know, how does this fit? Could this even be real and authentic, or are we creating a completely warped and distorted movement here, which is moving in a direction that wouldn't be true or authentic? And so we've got that with social movements, but then we've also got that with media, where so much of the media at this point is questionable. I think we're all feeling that, whether it actually be the story or the images that we're looking at. You know, Aquarius rules the internet, social media, yeah, even UFOs. I mean, and we've seen those peppering the news lately as well. It's, you know, anything that's kind of like futuristic and on the edge, and on the forefront of pushing us forward. So the practice I gave to my group yesterday, but I think it's a good practice really for everybody, so I want to share it in a more public fashion, is to play this sort of game called true beauty versus glamour magic. And with Venus having just moved into Taurus, I think this is a really beautiful time to begin to sort of play with this idea for yourself. There's this way that I believe that for the most part, we can sort of feel what's true in our body. My teacher would say truth has a clunk to it, right? It's got heft, it's got weight. And so as you're panning the world over the next few days, as Pluto's making its ingress into Aquarius, I want you to start to pay attention to the images you're confronted with. You know, I made a Facebook post as well about this, so you can see one of the images to just get an idea of what I'm talking about. But like, you know, there is a difference between real beauty, which displays something just honest, and it doesn't have a hook. It's not trying to manipulate you. It's not trying to sell you something. It doesn't have an agenda. It just feels honest. And there's beauty in that, right? It's like the grimace on a mother's face when she's giving birth. It's like a flower that grows up in the crack of a sidewalk in an imperfect neighborhood. I spoke once about, you know, the city of Dubai being a very Aquarian city. It's a man-made oasis in the desert where they had beautiful urban planning, but none of it is natural and real. So it's like an Aquarian city, and the beauty you see there is glamour magic. It is intended, planned to look beautiful. It doesn't mean we can't think that's also beautiful. Doesn't mean we can't get off on it, but we should have the conscious awareness that this thing was made through an agenda, and it's not real beauty. Whereas then I compared that to Palestine, and it's like old grottos and like no straight lines, no city planning, nothing is perfect there. But there's this real beauty to it because it's honest, you know, it's made out of the hard work of the hands of the families who lived in the places. And it's got a real honesty to it. And the land there has a real heartbeat to it as well. Like it's alive, it breathes. And so like just panning the world, like for, you know, are the images I'm looking at glamour magic? Even if they're beautiful, like really there's so much photography out there where people are posing, and it's, so that's like a form of glamour magic because it's not like an authentically caught shot. But there's beauty in it, right? But knowing the difference, feeling how true beauty, the beauty that has an honesty to it, has a clunk or a resonance to it. Allowing ourselves to build and refine this muscle of like, okay, this what I'm looking at is synthetic. It's part of this plastic curated world of social media. And this what I'm looking at is connected to humanity. Because the shadow side of Aquarius is that more than human archetype, the hope, the augmented human, transhumanism, and I really think it's important as Pluto makes its way through, because we will see that. Because Pluto is here, we're guaranteed to see the shadow side of Aquarius come into manifestation. And I'm not trying to scare you. These things are real. It's not a conspiracy theory to say that they've developed chips that you can put in your brain and to make yourself smarter or to retain more information. I mean, these things have actually been invented. So we will see them. We see chat CG. We see, AI that can write an essay for you. What's on the horizon for students? We need to kind of know, like we need to develop this muscle where if I'm reading something, because I've done this practice of feeling into what's human, what's honest, what's beautiful. And this is glamour magic. This is synthetic or plastic. Because we've done this practice, we can feel a resonance behind even what we're reading. Was this written by a human? Is this a real human experience that I'm reading? Is this a true thing? Or is this part of this manufactured synthetic Aquarian world that we're moving into? So I think all of this is really important. And with Venus and Taurus, Venus is the sign of the body where the divine spark then comes home to roost, in a sense. It's where we make good soil. Venus rules our values. So we begin to, play with what's important to us. We begin to have a self-interest. So we're interested in ourselves. We're cultivating self-love here. We're interested in Eros and all of the things that make being human and alive juicy, and real. There's kind of a hedonistic quality to Taurus. It's slow. It's home of the Epicurean, like the person who just really enjoys and savors being alive and having a body. And so, while we're tuning this body vessel with Venus in Taurus, this coming moon cycle, couldn't we be then doing this practice of true beauty versus glamour magic? The other thing we have at the start of this moon cycle, so the moon cycle is in Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars, and there's a square to Mars in this moon cycle. And for the first time in 7 months, Mars is going to change signs. When he goes retrograde, he stays in a sign for like 7-8 months. It's a really long time, because when Mars is direct and moving forward, he moves through a sign in like 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes even less. So for the first time, Mars is going to move out of Gemini and into Cancer. Yeah, after 7-8 months, he's been here. So in Gemini, he was really, really moving over the process of speaking and all of our mercurial tasks, our communication, our transportation, but most importantly, you could see it in the way the fiery talk came up and how people were frustrated and angry in their speech, or feeling the heat behind what they wanted to say, the eros and passion behind what they wanted to speak. And when he moves into Cancer, this is a kind of a place where Mars isn't quite as home. It's a very wet place and it's very emotional, and Mars is very erect and penetrative, and he's associated with doing and action. And so to get kind of bogged down in the watery emotional home of Cancer can be very activating to our pain body, to our emotional body. It can frustrate old wounds, bring up a lot of old hurts, can bring forward anger and just snappiness, frustration, all of those things. So watch to see if for some reason, if your pain body is activated in a way that in a way that like it doesn't make sense, meaning there's no impetus that you can find in your own life. Sometimes the pain body is activated because something actually happened, right? So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if just for some reason it's like, wow, all of a sudden my emotional pain body just seems to be really activated. I feel my inner child being really stirred up. That could be, you know, this Mars now moving into Cancer, to the home of Cancer. And then we also have Black Moon Lilith, speaking of inner children, still traveling throughout Leo, kind of bringing up the kind of death mother archetype, or that energy of the death mother, like inflicts this critical intent or real pointed shame into the child. Leo is the home of the divine magical child. And so you've got Black Moon Lilith, the death mother, moving through this sign of where, you know, when we were a child, where were we criticized to the point where we shut down a part of ourselves and no longer express it. The light side of Black Moon Lilith is the opportunity to do some reclamation work around those places where our expression was shut down, our innocence was kind of taken from us, and the opportunity to reclaim that and have more sovereignty for ourselves. Because Leo is about being seen. Leo wants to be on the world stage. He wants to let his light shine. And so to have Black Moon Lilith move through a spot where we're potentially now looking at the places where we don't let our light shine, where we don't allow ourselves to be seen, where has criticism from parents, adults, things like that, where has that stolen our ability to really step out into the world and allow ourselves to be seen. So we've still got Black Moon Lilith here. We will have her here for another 9 months or so. So it's a great time to be working with the death mother archetype, and where she has like kind of paralyzed or frozen certain places within us that have shut down our full expression and have made it difficult for us to be seen in our radiance out in the world. So I'm just looking to see if there is anything else I really want to speak to. We still have that Neptune conjuncting the full moon, and so there's still that quality, like I spoke to, of Neptune, of for one, can be a dreamlike quality, but for two, it can slow things down. So it's kind of an interesting it's an interesting sign or planet to have close to all of this freshness and movement and spring-like quality. It may mean that we begin the month more like a slow unfolding rather than, you know, a gigantic spark. And then as the moon and sun separate from Neptune and we get to the middle of the month and have the full moon, that might be when we feel more of the kind of like sparky energy. You know, Neptune can sort of dilute or diffuse things. And so we may not feel that spark in the way of spark on the actual full moon. And then I spoke to Jupiter and Chiron, which are traveling close to each other. I spoke to that in an earlier video, like in depth. But that's a beautiful sign for your healing. You know, Aries is the kind of sign that is the essence of who we are. It speaks to the essence, right? Who we are with no additions, no subtractions, who we are before the world corrupted us, right? With its conditioning and, you know, paradigms and cultural corruptions. It's like the essence self. And then we have Jupiter moving through that sign, really magnifying issues of the essence self, like places where we are detached from the essence self or wounded around the essence self, where we aren't in relationship to the essence self, but also making it easier to come in contact with the essence self because it's such a magnification with Jupiter. And so with him conjunct Chiron, Chiron being the sign of the wounded healer, or the planet of the wounded healer, and Chiron speaks to us of our soul wounds, the wounds that we can't heal, the wounds that, you know, we may have tried our whole lives to be, to conquer, you know, and that's kind of an Aries activity, conquering, you know, our wounds. And we've done it to no avail because the wound just still exists. And so I think really what this kind of conjunction speaks to, with Jupiter magnifying the wound, so like bringing it up, so it's like it's forcing it to be looked at. And you know, dealing with Aries in the places where Aries wants to conquer something, like healing can be like that. It can be like a conquering, like, oh, I'm going to go after that and I'm going to heal it. So I'm going to get it, you know, I'm going to bring it to its knees and make it, you know, prostrate before me because I need to get better. I don't want to deal with it anymore. And like, what is really the chironic wound is the wound that we need to be in relationship with. You know, it's the wound that isn't going to heal. It's the wounded healer. Chiron spends his whole life wounded, you know, at the end of his life. He is unable, to the point in which he dies, to be able to heal this wound. And so it's the wound we must meet, we must integrate, we must be in relationship with it. We accept, acknowledge, and eventually love the contribution this wound has made to our lives, really, you know, and just, this is part of my story. It's part of my mythos. And even though it would never have been my preference to have this thing happen, it did. And so now I must be in relationship with what happened, you know, be in relationship with the wound. If I feel it come up, oh, hello, there you are today, wound. Yes, you're stirring my heart. You're shaking my confidence. You're making me feel grief. Thank you for bringing those things to my awareness, you know, stuff like that. That's kind of the chironic wound. And with Jupiter here, I think, you know, I think we're all going to have a stirring of a younger wound come up and a potential chance to not heal it, but elevate our relationship with it. You know, Jupiter brings something beneficial to everything he touches. And so what I'm thinking or seeing is this kind of revolution in um, how we relate to our wounds. So I'm going to stop here because I've been talking for quite a bit and I've covered most of the big astrology for this new moon. And wish y'all well. I'll be back more later. All right. Have a good day.